Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada. And it's spring weather in Ontario, Canada, 18 degrees, about 65 Fahrenheit on the 5th of November. It's lovely out there. And we have episode number 59 of the Yakking Show. And this is where we talk about life, business, and more. And we bring you tips and ideas for a changing world. As always, we have interesting guests. Today's is no exception. It's going to be a fun show. Someone I've known for a while, but it's not my job to introduce him. So first, I must welcome Kathleen, who will introduce our guest. So hi, Kathleen. Good to have you back on the show again.
Hello, Peter. It's great to be here as always. So yes, we do in fact have a wonderful guest here with us today. But first, I'd like to thank all of our audience for tuning in and watching us. We so appreciate you tuning in and your comments. So do please keep them coming. And if anyone out there is interested in becoming being a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. So today we have Tim Gibney as our guest. He is a personal and business coach. He is known as the Resilience Doctor, and we'll have him tell you more about that. So welcome, Tim. How are you doing today?
Absolutely wonderful. And going back to Peter's weather report, it's fabulous in November to have this, I'll tell you.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So Tim, I've just given our audience a little bit about you, a little snippet. So please go ahead and tell our audience a little bit more about your background and what it is that you do as the Resilience Doctor.
Okay, well, first of all, and I say this with a smile on my face, but I'm serious at the same time, I would just as soon be asking the questions, not answering them, because I know I'm better at asking than answering.
Well, so, we'll have to see about that.
Yeah, you could be the judge, that's for sure, yeah. A little bit about me, married to Debbie. I have 2 adult daughters. I have got 1 granddaughter. Grew up in Western Canada, moved to Ontario 28 years ago. I guess you could probably put it this way. I like variety, because if you ever saw my, how could I phrase it? My so-called selected achievements, I have bounced around a little bit in my life, in my earlier life, and it's given me a great deal of information that I try to help people with. So that gives you a little bit of background personally, is what it is. Did you want me to talk a little bit about my background, or?
Yes.
Well, we will go get you going, because I know, having known you for a while, I know you have an interesting background. Start us off with how you got into being self-employed and then a business owner, and I think you've stayed like that for most of your working life, correct?
Exactly. As I jokingly have said to people, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and that's a step above a serial murderer. So it's
well, there are many of those around.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. No, I'll probably start right from the first job that I had as an adult, and you'll see how, whether I can't focus or not, I'm not sure. But the first job I had as an adult was I became an orderly in a hospital. Oh. And I did that because I was 19 years old, and I knew there was more women working in the hospital than there were men. So that's, and needless to say, I didn't meet my wife in a hospital. So it's, after that, and I was in that for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and I frankly enjoyed it, because I was able to get, a day job, which was 7 to 3, and I still could do whatever I wanted to do. But my father was in the funeral business. And in the back of my mind always was, it's always intrigued me about what my dad did. And so I apprenticed in the funeral service. Oh. But I didn't do it with my father, even though he had his own funeral business. I was in Regina, I was in Saskatoon. Then I came back to work with my father for a while, and then I went and worked in Kelowna. And then I saw the light and realized that it wasn't for me. And so I started a manufacturing business after my father sold the business. And well, in fact, I'll go a little bit of a sideline on this one, is that I'm a very focused and driven individual. So when I made up my mind I was going to be in this manufacturing business, I knew that I would be a success. Well, I should have told my actions that, because my actions proved how wrong I was. In the first year, we lost, I think it was $100. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
but I'd only paid myself $3,000 for the whole year.
Wow.
And then frankly, it was just a blessing, because it made me realize that I didn't know it all. And that's probably shaped my entire life. I'm not afraid to ask people for other information, even if it's contrary to what I'm thinking, because it has always made me think differently. So we'll make a long story short, from the end of the first year to the year we sold, about 10 and a half years later, we increased our sales volume 604% in about 10 and a half years.
Wow.
I mean, it was massive, massive growth is what it was. And the nice thing is we didn't increase staff. We just became very, very effective in what we were doing. And because of that, one of my competitors was about 150 miles away. I think he got scared. And so he decided to buy us out. And then I worked for him for a while. And because he was very left-brained and I'm very right-brained, it was like bumping up against the wall every day. And so after he had me sign a 1-year contract. And after 9 months, he came in one day later he's 150 miles away. Got there later one day, and he came in the door of his office, which used to be mine, and he was vibrating. And my intuition says, oh, something's up. And 5 minutes later, he said, here's your check for this month, and the final 3 months that you're here, get out.
Oh, wow. Oof.
And I got to be honest with you, I was, as much as I'm fairly bold, I was a little taken back.
Well,
Yeah.
no
But
doubt.
about four blocks from my office on my drive home, and you got to remember, this was it would have been about September. I just yelled out the biggest hallelujah that I've ever heard in my entire life, because I realized I had the shackles taken off of me.
Yeah.
And then I ran for city council and I ran for school board at the same time, because I had nothing to do. And amazingly, I get elected to both. And then, make a long story short, that's shortly after, well, I guess within the next year or so, I was offered a fabulous job to move in Ontario. So that gives you a little bit of an idea there. But it was shortly after we got to Ontario, is that my older daughter, who was in grade 8, came home and told me a story. And it changed, or it transformed the way I look at things. She said, Dad, I got to talk to you, because I was working at the house. So I said, what is it, Charlotte? And she said, Dad, all the girls in my class, they go home and they get beaten. And I said, what? And she says, oh yeah, they tell me that they get home and their dads hit them all the time. And the first thing that came to my mind was, how do they manage? Grade 8. I mean, this is a development time.
Yeah.
And not long after that, my younger daughter, Nicole, she came home and she told me a story about how the substitute teacher was kind of like stretching in class, and then would swing and smack the back of the boys' heads.
Wow.
What?
I mean, it was mind-blowing to me, but all that did for me was, again, I asked, how do they survive? How do they manage? How are they going to, live life? Way grade 2 and grade 8 people should be living.
Mm-hmm.
And it started me off on a journey that's lasted to this day. And it really transformed the way I operate, because I started interviewing like prisoners of war, people that have been abused, both men and women, people with debilitating illnesses and injuries. I interviewed a young woman. She was 21, but she'd gone blind at age 7. And I asked them all the same questions. I think there was 11 or 13 questions in that area there. And I was only doing it just so I could just understand them. And it was having nothing to do with changing profession. I was just so intrigued, and I wanted to tell my daughter's stories, so that when they had garbage and trying times in their lives happen, they would all of a sudden, oh, but these people were able to manage it, I should be able to too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I went on far too long, but that just gives you,
No, that's a very interesting background, Tim. So explain to us then how this evolved into what you are now calling yourself, the resilience doctor.
oh, okay. So after about 3 years, I started to see patterns. And so I made some notes, and I said, oh my God, there was 8 particular traits that they all used, and they used them at particular times. And the interesting thing about the traits, and I didn't realize this right away, but they all fit into what I call our work plan, because we decide, we do, and we deliver. And they all interconnect into that. So whether you're working, or whether you're trying to lose weight, or whether you're having self-doubts or whatever it is, it all goes back to decide, which is thinking. Do has a lot to do with action, but also thinking. And deliver, because when we deliver something to somebody, it has to be, we have to have a thought process in it.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, as to who are these people, how am I going to deliver it, you know, and those type of things. And the funniest thing is that I operated under Tim Gibney, but I guess it's probably 8 or 9 years ago minimum. I was working with a lady in California, and we were talking about different things, and she all of a sudden just said, "Time out, Tim. You call yourself Tim Gibney." And I said, "Well, that's what my mother gave me as a name." That was. And she said, no. She says, "You're more than that. Could you write down or type out what you do in a page or two? And she says, when we talk in 10 days or now, I would like to have it before, just so I could understand what you do." So I typed it out, whatever it was, sent it off to her. And so when we talked 10 days later, she says, "Tim, you're the resilience doctor."
Ah, there we go.
And I said, oh. And that was for free.
Yeah, very good.
So I don't know whether that told you enough, Kathleen, but it gives you an idea how it became that.
And I got to ask you to add on to that your little, and again, what's the animal?
It's called a tardigrade.
Tardigrade. I always want to mix that up. Just tell Kathleen.
That's the highly educational one. Most people call it the water bear.
Okay, well, tell Kathleen what it is and how you chose that one.
And I didn't realize this up until, it's probably maybe about a year after this, is that the water bear can be frozen, picked up in let's say in a pail. And by the way, they're very minute. If you ever, if you don't have a digital watch and you see the numbers on a watch, if you took, let's say, the letter 3 and cut it in half,
mm-hmm.
that would be the size of a tardigrade or water bear. But you can pick them up because they live in water. They're the most resilient mammal on our planet. But you can pick it up in a pail of water and freeze it solid. And 10 years later, if you thaw it out, it will swim away.
Wow.
That's resilience.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's unbelievable.
It is. It truly is. I mean, when I found that out, I said, "Oh, wow." I said, so I in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, Peter, because I forgot all about it, to be very honest.
No, I remember you telling me about it a long time ago, and I was amazed about it. Yeah, no, that's very good and very appropriate for what you do as well. So let me ask you one. I've known you, 6, 8, 10 years, quite a long time anyway.
Yeah,
and
8 to 10, I'm sure.
8 to 10, yeah. We met, we got to tell this story. We met on a workshop that was held by a small business organization, and we were not very impressed with the presenter. And I think that's when we met. We were sitting next to one another making sort of snide comments about how we could do this job a hell of a lot better than he was. And I think we nearly got chucked out, and then we adjourned to the tea table and consumed more than our share of chocolate cookies and tea. But anyway, that's the sort of escapades we've got up to over the years. But as long as all that time I've known you, you're always studying something. You're always learning something. And it might be something to do with your faith, and I know you're a man of faith. It might be to do something with business, psychology, the municipalities' misdeeds, you name it. You're always studying something. So what are you studying now?
Well, in fact, and it's probably related to the COVID-19 situation.
Yeah.
And yet I saw it before this happened, and I call it our ability to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, it's affected everybody, no matter
Absolutely.
who we are.
Sure.
And the key thing is that, I've been thinking about it at length. And I heard a speaker many, many years ago talking about somebody saying they had hardening of the categories.
Yeah.
Not hardening of the arteries, but hardening of the categories. In other words, it's got to be this way or no way.
Right.
And I think in the world that we're living in, so much is changing so fast that if we don't start to become more adaptable, we're really, really sunk. Mm-hmm. I really, really believe that. In fact, and it's, if we have our views that are so firm and unchangeable, what does it say about us? Really, and sometimes you have to look a little bit different. And I'm a firm believer, because our life is a constant journal from A to B. Because once we move from A to B, the B becomes an A, and then we have another B. Mm-hmm. And there's ups and downs, and there's bumps along the way. And all of those affect us. The good things affect us, of course, positively, but the bad things, we will almost look in a mirror, and then we start to question ourselves. And it's those thoughts that we have, the questioning of ourselves, that, I mean, it's mind-boggling what our thoughts do to us.
I mean, that's a good point, Tim. I mean, if you're looking at the current world events, it's been very divisive. It's either you're in this camp or you're in that camp. Yeah. And the people in this camp can't see how the people in this camp think, and vice versa.
Yeah. Are you talking about the American election?
No, I wasn't going to touch that. I wasn't going to touch that. I was just talking.
But it's the same way, though. It's two camps.
True enough. I was just basically referring to the pandemic.
Yes, absolutely.
And the response to the current world events.
Yeah. In fact, and I can relate it back, not just to that, but to people in business in general.
Yep.
No matter who we are, we're very, very happy with what we've done in our lives. And the example that I gave earlier, when I started my first business, I knew it all.
Yep.
Up until we were starving. And then I said, but there's a lot of people who don't want to veer off of that. Right. Just saying, well, geez, what if I read this? Or what if I talked to somebody? Or what if I watched a YouTube video, but instead of just watching it, made some notes and then implemented the notes that I made? And that's because I think we're, I think we all have a little bit of fear of the unknown.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Years ago, I was at a workshop once, and somebody was talking about fear, and I don't know how or why it came to me, is I said, fear to me, and I just came up with it at the time. Fear means it's a funny emotion arresting results. And arresting is the key thing, because any results that we get are good. Because whether they're absolutely what we wanted or the worst thing that ever happened, at least we know what doesn't work. Right. So we can try something else.
Right.
So let me pick up on that. And I think we've had this conversation before, but for the benefit of our listeners to get a bit of your wisdom here, I think I made the case to you some years back, and it ties in with the 8 traits you found when you were doing all those interviews with people who'd lived through bad stuff, that as you know, the COVID thing does not worry me in the slightest. The reaction to it does. And when people say, how can you be so relaxed? I say, for 2 reasons. At some stage, I'm going to die. Whether it's tomorrow from the COVID virus or in 20 years' time from another heart attack or being run over by a bus, both of those are more or less out of my control. And I just have to accept I'm going to die. So I refuse to worry about it. But the second one to me is, having had guns pointed in my face and being groups of up to 60 people threatening to kill me many times over a period, and a lot of other bad stuff, worrying about a virus that I've got a 99.9% chance of surviving from is not a big issue in my life. So the point I'm trying to make is that those of us and those of those who you interviewed who've been through some really bad times, and you've had tough times, it gives us a perspective on things that's somewhat different to someone who's had an easy ride through life. And I found in the first recession I lived through in South Africa, and with the virus now, the people who've had an easy ride and suddenly their whole life has gone upside down really struggle. Some of them get over it quick, some struggle, some never get over it. Am I on the right track with having survived some sort of adversity? We're better placed for more, or what do you think, Tim?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and I think Peter knows this, but I don't think you know, Kathleen, unless Peter had mentioned to you. Back about 2003, I got an ear infection.
That's right.
I was trying out what I'd learned in the financial industry. And I chose the financial industry because if there's rejection in life, you get a lot of it in that business.
Yes, you do. That's right. And
so I had in the first 3 years that I had been in the business, I did real well. I mean, I qualified for the $1 Million Round Table, and I was, this self-confident Irish person here went over the top, is what it was. But then I decided that I was bored with the company, so I decided to go on my own, and I was on an appointment, about 45 minutes from here. And during the appointment, I got an earache. And it was the worst earache that I'd ever had. And so I finished the appointment and I started to drive home. But on the way home, I got dizzier and dizzier and dizzier until I got home. And I got home, I got out of the car and I just laid down on the couch. And the funniest thing about it, there's a saying that, and because I'm Irish, I know this, is that an Irishman, and I don't drink anymore, by the way, but I could tell you this, is that an Irishman is never drunk as long as he can hold on to a blade of grass and doesn't fall off the face of the earth. The interesting thing about that is that the reason I bring that up is because I laid on the couch, and we have an extremely long one. It's over 6 feet long. And I thought that I was falling off the face of the earth, laying down from this dizziness.
Wow.
And well, it transformed how I looked at life. I mean, like Peter, you've gone through worse than I did, because I mean, I didn't have any people holding guns to me. But it took me 6 months to realize that if I didn't get my act together, I was doing it no one any good, because I went from very, very high income to not going out. And I said, whoa, Tim, you got to get your act together. And so that's when I started to, in fact, I started to make notes, because I realized that if I didn't make it a learning experience, it would be a waste of time. So I made notes every day for 5 to 7 years. I just had a Word document, and I was going to give it to my daughters, because I mean who knows, they may have even read it, And so I gave it to a lady who I truly respect. Glad you appreciate the humor, Peter. I gave it to her, and she had it for about 6 months, and all of a sudden she phoned me up and said, Tim, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. And I said, well, she says, what do you want first? She said, and I said, well, give me the bad news. She said, I didn't edit it. I said, you had it 6 months, you didn't edit it? She says, I read the first 20 pages, and it was 120 some pages, single spaced long. And she said, I read the first pages, but I got so interested in the way you'd written it, I forgot to edit it. That's when I realized that you had to go and find another editor. But she says, the good news is, don't put it on 8.5 by 11 typed and put it in a 3-ring binder for your daughters. You better get it published. And so I did.
Oh, interesting. So,
yeah.
So I have another question for you, Tim. And you've worked with many organizations to improve productivity. What is the most common hurdle you've identified? Is there one?
I think that we as humans, we forget that our attitudes, thoughts, and work ethic affect us, they become great hindrances. Because if you think of our attitudes, and we've talked about that quite a bit in what we've talked already, our thoughts, I mean, we all have this, negative self-talk at some time of our life. At least I think most people do, because I do.
Absolutely.
And then our work ethic, and of course it affects that. So it hinders us, and that we're not able to, as I call, write the finest chapter in our life. Because if we can get all our thoughts marching to the beat of the same drummer, we can create a wonderful life for ourselves. In fact, many years ago, I wrote this down, and I don't want to know whether it makes any sense, but I'll share it with you. I think sometimes we have what I call an ailment, self-sufficient stagnation imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
See, we were all about ourselves. We're so good, and it's good. We have to have positive thoughts about ourselves, but sometimes it's such an imbalance that we forget to maybe just examine our own lives just a little deeper.
I think
Did they answer that?
Probably call that a rut, wouldn't they?
Big ruts.
Yeah.
But no one likes to admit they're in a rut. No. And because I was in the funeral business, I can say this: the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth.
Oh.
And I speak honestly on that, because years ago in the 70s, when I was in the funeral business, I was asked by my employer at that time to go help another person in a different area of the province that I was living in. I had to take the funeral coach up there and help him. And we had the funeral, and then we drove up to a place called Turtleford. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. And they started to dig the grave for this, I think it was a lady, and it's so long ago. And they came upon a massive boulder. So they dug around it, and they dug around it. And it was, without a lie, it was 12 feet long and 6 feet deep at parts. And that's why I always think about the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. Because this looked like a long rut.
Long rut.
Yeah.
We're going to be running out of time in a minute. So I don't want to miss the opportunity to give our listeners and viewers a way to contact you. How can they contact you, should they wish to talk to you?
Well, in fact, I think probably the best way to, I don't think, well, first of all, I don't think anybody's going to run, oh, geez, he's such a good guy, he's going to pick up the phone and call me and want to do work with me. So the fact is, what I would suggest is going to theresilienceDoctor.com, and I blog less than I used to, let's put it that way, but I blog at least once a month. And you could look for, my thoughts on different things and success stories from different people that I've done research on and stuff like that, that may uplift them and help them write the finest chapter in their life. And if they really want to take it further, my contact information's on that site as well. In fact, what I'll do, Peter, is I'll share the link with you. I'll just email it to you, and
that's fine. We will put that on the video at the point at which we're talking. Something else that I know you've helped a lot of people with, and that is as a grief counselor. Do you want to take a minute and talk about that, or is up to you?
Well, it has to do with my background in the funeral business. When I left the funeral business or the funeral service, I may have left working there, but I've taken all of that knowledge and, I guess, compassion with me. And well, right now I'm working with the Victorian Order of Nurses, and just volunteering. And I have quite a number of hours a week that I do. Well, now we're just doing it on the phone, and it's. I just have such great compassion, because we all have deaths in our lives. Like when my health changed drastically. When Peter had had guns to his head, that makes you think differently. And it's all a form of death, which is a loss of some part of you. Sure. And so I just believe in, and grief therapy, the way I do it, and I'm not a grief therapist, I'm just a volunteer. The fact is, you got to be a good listener.
Listener, good.
And don't think that you have to have all the answers.
Sure, just to be a listener. No, and that's really good. And I think a good service for the community that you provide there. We are out of time, so I must hand over to Kathleen to do her normal, wonderful end of our show. So over to you, Kathleen. Thanks, Tim, from me.
You're very welcome, Peter. I'm honored that I was asked.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. Yes, on my part too. Just you've been a wonderful guest, so thank you so much, and thank all of you for joining in and tuning in to our show. We so appreciate you. You have to know that we appreciate your comments. So do please keep them coming. We read all of them. And if anyone out there is interested in becoming a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. So until next time, stay well, and bye-bye from us.